From people who unalived their whole families to conceal secrets, to moments of rage that ended the lives of innocent family members, family killers have little to no remorse for the horrible crime they commit. They even try to lie their way out of a lengthy court sentence. But in the end, justice prevails. Anthony Tot. Something changed in the Tot family home after they moved. Anthony, Megan, and their 3 children were well known in the community as an all-American family that frequently went on trips together. However, after moving to Celebration, Florida, the family became withdrawn. Megan, a physical therapist and yoga instructor, had contracted Lyme disease sometime in 2019 and had become withdrawn since then. The kids were once very active in school and extracurricular activities, but now no one has seen or heard from them for days. What was really going on in the Tot family home? In late 2019, relatives and neighbors became concerned when the Tot family suddenly stopped communicating. There were no phone calls, no messages, and no activity from the household. After days of silence, law enforcement conducted a welfare check at the family's home. Inside, they discovered a horrifying scene. Megan Tot and the couple's 3 children were found deceased. The family dog was also found unalived. Investigators had a lot of reasons to visit the family home. Besides conducting a welfare check on the home, they had also been investigating Anthony for fraud. Anthony was a physical therapist, and his patients noticed that they had been charged for services he had never rendered. This fraud went on undetected for months, until, eventually, investigators got involved and decided to visit the home. Anthony Tot was not in the house at the time, but the bodies of his entire family were. Anthony had been casually living with the decomposing bodies for weeks or even months by that point. He was located later and taken into custody. Almost immediately, suspicion focused on him as the only surviving member of the household. During questioning, Anthony gave conflicting stories about what had happened. At one point, he claimed that his wife was responsible for the deaths and that he had only discovered the scene afterward. He suggested that Megan had been struggling emotionally and had harmed the children before ending her own life. He would then switch his story, claiming that he was responsible for their demise, but that he had been hearing voices for several months, and this was a mental episode gone bad. The Tot family was going through a crisis. Megan could no longer work because of her diagnosis, and Anthony had been diagnosed with diabetes. The family was not what it used to be, but that did not mean that they needed to have their lives taken away from them. Forensic findings and the timeline of events pointed directly to Anthony. Prosecutors argued that he intentionally ended the lives of his wife and children and then attempted to shift blame to avoid responsibility. Evidence showed that the deaths did not occur all at once and that Tot had opportunities to seek help but did not do so. Even if they believed that he had been suffering from a mental crisis, the prosecution argued that Anthony was seen acting normal in the days immediately after he had just unalived his entire family. They argued that this was not a man in distress, but a man who had made a conscious decision and was now trying to cover it up. As the case moved forward, more details emerged about Anthony's lies and financial problems. He had been under investigation for fraud related to his business activities, and prosecutors suggested that the pressure of exposure, combined with his desire to maintain control over his family, played a role in what happened. They described him as someone who valued his image above everything else and chose a horrific path rather than face consequences. During the trial, Anthony's behavior drew attention. He often appeared calm and detached, even as graphic and emotional testimony was presented. The prosecution emphasized the calculated nature of the acts and the fact that Tot was the only adult present when his family's lives were ended. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the investigation, but the jury ultimately rejected those arguments. Anthony was convicted of multiple counts related to the unalivings of his wife and children. He received several life sentences, ensuring he will never be released from prison. The court made it clear that the severity of the crime and the complete loss of innocent lives warranted the harshest possible punishment. After being sentenced for the passing of his entire family, the court later added another year for animal cruelty, after learning that he had shot the family dog as well. Anthony did the worst thing imaginable, and he apparently did it without any clear motive. Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh was a well-known lawyer from a powerful family in South Carolina. For generations, the Murdaugh family held influence in local courts and law enforcement. Alex grew up surrounded by status, money, and respect, and for years he lived the life of a successful attorney, husband, and father of 2 sons. To many people, he seemed like the perfect man. But behind the scenes, Alex's life was falling apart. He had developed a serious addiction to substances and was secretly stealing large amounts of money from clients, co-workers, and his own law firm. Millions of dollars were missing, and people were starting to ask questions. At the same time, his younger son, Paul, was facing serious legal trouble for a fatal boat crash that had already damaged the family's reputation. On the night of June 7, 2021, Alex called emergency services and reported finding his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, lifeless near the dog kennels on their large rural property. Both of them had been shot. Alex told police he had been visiting his mother and had just returned home to this gruesome scene. At first, he was treated as a grieving husband and father. As investigators looked closer, problems with Alex's story began to appear. Phone records, vehicle data, and a video recorded on Paul's phone showed that Alex was actually at the kennels shortly before Maggie and Paul were harmed. This directly contradicted what he had told police. Police also uncovered the full scope of Alex's financial crimes during the investigation. Prosecutors argued that his world was closing in on him. His theft was about to be exposed, his law career was collapsing, and his family name was in danger. According to the state, Alex believed that removing his wife and son would gain him sympathy, slow down investigations, and buy him time to deal with his problems. Prosecutors described Alex as someone who believed he could talk his way out of anything. The defense argued that there was no direct evidence tying him to the scene at the exact moment. While he cried in court, jurors heard how often he lied to police, friends, and even his own family. The kennel video, combined with his financial crimes and false statements, ultimately destroyed his credibility. In the end, Alex was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of release. He later received additional sentences for his financial crimes. Alex Murdaugh lost everything, and his family paid the highest possible price. Chris Watts. In August 2018, Chris Watts was living in Frederick, Colorado, with his wife, Shanann Watts, their two young daughters, Bella and Celeste. And Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with their unborn son, whom they planned to name Nico. To the outside world, the family appeared stable and happy. In reality, their marriage was deteriorating. Chris was involved in an extramarital relationship and had begun to view his family as an obstacle to the life he wanted to pursue. In the early morning hours of August 13th, Chris committed acts of extreme violence inside the family home. He ended the life of his pregnant wife and then took the lives of his two daughters, Bella and Celeste. Rather than seeking help or showing remorse, he immediately shifted. He transported their bodies to a remote oil site connected to his workplace. Shanann was left in a shallow grave, while Bella and Celeste were placed inside crude oil tanks. Afterward, Chris returned home and behaved as though nothing unusual had happened. When Shanann failed to attend a scheduled medical appointment later that morning, her close friend Nicole became alarmed and contacted law enforcement. Police arrived at the house for a welfare check and soon encountered Chris, who appeared detached and unemotional. He claimed his wife had taken the children on a playdate, even though her car, phone, purse, and personal items were still inside the home. As officers searched the house, they found Shanann's wedding ring placed on a counter and the children's comfort items left behind. Details that raised immediate suspicion. Chris answered questions politely but showed little urgency or concern. A neighbor later told investigators that Chris's behavior was strange and inconsistent with that of a worried husband and father. Within days, the case escalated rapidly. Chris gave televised interviews pleading for the return of his family, standing on his porch and asking for his wife and children to come home. However, investigators noted that his words felt rehearsed. Surveillance footage, phone records, and inconsistencies in his statements continued to point toward his involvement. On August 15th, Chris was taken into custody and agreed to a polygraph examination. During questioning, he maintained his innocence, but the results indicated deception. Confronted with this, his story began to unravel. Eventually, Chris admitted to ending Shanann's life and later acknowledged what he had done to his children as well. During court proceedings, family members of Shanann delivered emotional statements describing the immense loss and betrayal they felt. Shanann's father spoke of the joy his daughter and grandchildren brought to those around them. Her brother addressed Chris directly, describing him as someone who was trusted to protect his family and instead destroyed it. Throughout these proceedings, Chris remained largely expressionless. When it was his turn to speak, he offered only a brief apology, acknowledging that words could not undo what he had done. The judge, however, did not accept any attempt to minimize the severity of the acts. In delivering the sentence, the judge described the case as one of the most inhumane and vicious crimes encountered in his judicial career, emphasizing not only the loss of life, but the calculated effort to hide it. Chris Watts was sentenced to multiple life terms in prison without the possibility of release. He will spend the rest of his life incarcerated, with no chance of returning to society. Christopher McNab. Christopher McNab's victim was his 15-day-old daughter, Kalia McNab. Newton County, Georgia, residents were left stunned when they heard that a child's body was found in the nearby woods, skull fractured, and tied up in a blue t-shirt before being stuffed in a drawstring bag. That child was reported missing by her mother, Courtney Bell, just days prior. The police immediately knew who the unaliver was, none other than her own father, Chris. According to neighbors, the couple was known for being loud and rowdy. They lived in a rundown home in New County, where they would frequently use substances. The police had to be called to their residence several times over the years, mostly to resolve domestic disputes and over substance allegations. Despite their volatile relationship, Courtney got pregnant in 2017, and they had Kalia. According to Courtney, she had stayed up all night with Kalia and fell asleep on the couch around 5 in the morning. Kalia had been fussy that night and would not stop crying. When she woke up, Kalia was nowhere to be found. During the 911 call, Courtney told dispatchers that her boyfriend, Chris, was outside looking for their daughter. Unknown to her, Chris, probably in a substance daze, had gotten up sometime in the night and struck Kalia in the head with an object. This immediately disfigured her skull, after which he wrapped her in a t-shirt and stuffed her in a bag. According to investigators, Kalia was still alive through this, and only passed away later in the woods from suffocation. Officers arrived at Courtney and Chris's home, where they immediately felt like something was wrong. Chris was acting very defensive for someone whose infant daughter was missing. Just days later, a local cashier called police, claiming that Chris had walked into the store and started screaming, "I did not do it. I did not do it." A few hours earlier that same day, investigators had called to tell the couple that they had found Kalia's body. Chris went into panic mode and started roaming around New County, telling everyone about his innocence. The police were able to arrest him immediately because he already had a parole violation. During questioning, he denied any involvement. He claimed that despite the mountain of evidence stacked against him, he did not do it. Interestingly, the police also arrested Courtney, and the couple was tried together. According to the prosecution, Courtney was responsible for her daughter's demise, too. They alleged that while she did not have anything to do with her daughter's unaliving that night, she knew what Chris was capable of. In her neglect case, Courtney was sentenced to 30 years. Meanwhile, Chris continued to maintain his innocence. His defense team claimed that the jury would be more responsible for Kalia's passing than their client because he simply did not do it. Chris's story was that someone broke into the home while the couple was asleep, unalived Kalia, and then dumped her body in the woods. The jury did not believe this tale for a second. In the end, Chris was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Matthew Ponareno. Dispatch received a particularly distressing call in the early hours of March 25, 2023. Matthew, a resident of Palmer County in Ohio, calmly told dispatchers that he was responsible for the unaliving of his son, Jax. He told 911 that he had used a baseball bat to beat his son, that he was hearing voices and they told him to do it, and that his son was no longer responsive. Officers arrived at the scene, where they found Matthew hovering over Jax's lifeless body, allegedly crying. Matthew claimed that things got out of hand and that he would never think of hurting his son if it were not for the voices. Jax, who suffered from autism, was left under his father's supervision for the night. Matthew had a long-standing history of mental illness and was diagnosed with bipolar personality disorder. The police arrested him without incident, and Matthew went on to describe the events of that night. He claimed that Jax was sitting in the living room when the voices told Matthew to grab a baseball bat and beat his son. His son never saw it coming, and it was not like they were in a dispute earlier that day. This came completely out of the blue, which made the events even more tragic. Matthew was disconnected during the court proceedings and immediately accepted guilt. He refused a lengthy court trial, and the judge reviewed the evidence and went ahead with sentencing. Psychiatrists were called in, and while everyone agreed that the tragic events that night unfolded because of a severe mental health episode, Matthew was still responsible for the unaliving of his son. Jax's aunts and uncles took the stand, claiming that they held the state just as responsible as Matthew. They claimed that despite Matthew's public record of psychological troubles, child services did not intervene sooner. Matthew was sometimes disconnected and other times erratic in court. He even tried to lunge at one of the witnesses, but later apologized, claiming he did not know what went over him. The presiding judge believed that Matthew was a danger to society and sentenced him to a lifetime behind bars with the possibility of parole after 46 years. Matthew's defense team tried to have the conviction reversed and even called in Jax's mother to testify on Matthew's behalf. She claimed that nothing could bring her son back and that Matthew was someone who needed help more than punishment. The judge upheld his decision and Matthew was sent to prison. In 2025, news surfaced from prison officials that Matthew had taken his own life while he was locked up. This case serves as a chilling reminder of how it can take one moment to change everything. Jared Chance. Ashley Young was the sort of person who would see the good in people, even when they had very little to redeem themselves with. She was described by friends and family as a joy to be around, someone who could light up a room by just walking in. Her kindness went above and beyond what anyone else could imagine, and that included forgiving people who had done her wrong. One such person who did not deserve forgiveness, but Ashley forgave him anyway, was Jared Chance. Despite having a friendship, Jared was once accused of stealing from Ashley. Years later, the two reconnected, and she told him that they should start with a clean slate. Jared was struggling with substance issues that also impacted his mental health. He had several run-ins with the law, and the police had to be called to his family home several times because of domestic disputes. Eventually, Jared moved out and was struggling to make do by himself. That was when he reached out to Ashley. In November 2018, Ashley was on her way to meet Jared. Just days prior, Jared had crashed his car and Ashley came to his rescue. He was reportedly very thankful and promised to take her out for dinner to show his gratitude. A voicemail sent to a friend before she left was played in court, where Ashley showed genuine interest in Jared, hoping that he would be able to turn his life around just because he genuinely cared for her. But we're talking about a man who has had police called on him several times, most times for hurting his younger brother, and even for being disorderly in public spaces. Despite everyone warning her not to let Jared back into her life, Ashley went ahead anyway. In November, she finished her shift, got ready, and met Jared at her apartment. Only, Jared claimed that she never made it there that day, and that she probably went somewhere else. When asked to specify, Jared started getting flustered. The reason why he was even asked about Ashley's whereabouts in the first place was that Ashley's mother had filed a missing persons report after she could not get in contact with her daughter. When she found out that Jared was possibly the last person who had seen her, she reached out to him via text messages. The exchange between the two of them was shown to the jury. Jared swore up and down that he did not know where Ashley was, and went a step ahead and guaranteed her mother that he would never be the one to hurt her. Ironically, investigators now believe that as he was texting these heartfelt messages, he had already unalived Ashley. When searching for Ashley, police received a call from one of Jared's neighbors. He claimed that he went ahead with cleaning the basement and found blood there. When investigators went down to check, they found a human torso wrapped in a tarp. The torso was found to be that of Ashley's, and Jared was immediately taken into custody. During questioning, Jared claimed that he had no idea what happened to Ashley and that he would never think of harming her, much less unaliving her. Investigators never retrieved other parts of Ashley Young, but they were able to conclude that she was unalived in Jared's apartment. They found blood splatter and DNA evidence inside her apartment. Despite his innocent pleas, Jared was tried in court for the unaliving of Ashley Young. It was one of the most emotionally charged cases that the court had ever witnessed. Ashley's mother took the stand, screaming at Jared and reminding him that all she had left of her daughter was a box. Jared just stood there, with his head bowed down, not responding to anything she was saying. Other members of Ashley's family and her friends took the stand over the course of the trial. They claimed that Jared exploited Ashley's kindness, and for that, he should be punished. The judge agreed. In the end, Jared Chance was sentenced to 1 to 100 to 2 to 100 years for the unaliving of Ashley Young. His trial ran concurrently with his parents' trial. Allegedly, Jared had contacted his parents after he had unalived and already started dismembering Ashley's body. Conrad, Jared's younger brother, testified that the family car was used several times that night to go back and forth from Jared's place, and that he saw Ashley's car at some instance. Allegedly, Jared's parents helped cover up his crime and told him to refuse to comply with the police.